Every single week, millions of people walk into a fried chicken restaurant, hand over their money, bite into something that smells incredible, tastes unforgettable, and have absolutely no idea what is actually being cooked into that golden crust. Not the seasoning, not the batter, the oil, the invisible ingredient, the one nobody talks about. The one that determines whether your meal ends at the table or quietly continues inside your arteries for the next 2 years. Because the oil these brands are using, the oil they have never once put on a billboard, is one of the most studied, most debated, and most quietly damaging substances in the modern food supply. And the worst part? You have been eating it your entire life. There's a question that no fried chicken brand in the world wants you to ask. It is not about the calories. It is not about the sodium content. It is not about how many antibiotics were in the chicken before it hit the fryer. The question is simpler than all of that, and yet somehow it never appears on the menu board, never shows up in the television commercials, and never gets answered in the cheerful, family-friendly marketing that these billion-dollar chains produce at an industrial scale. The question is this: what exactly is this chicken being cooked in? Think about what that means for a moment. You know the spice blend. You know the brand name. You know the jingle. But the very substance that the chicken is submerged in, the liquid that penetrates every fiber of the meat, that crisps the exterior, that your body begins processing the moment you take a bite, that part remains largely invisible. And there is a reason for that. Because once you understand what most of these chains are actually using, and once you understand what happens to that substance at high heat, and once you understand what it does inside the human body over months and years of repeated consumption, the entire fried chicken industry begins to look very different. This is not a conversation about indulgence. This is not the usual lecture about eating less fast food. This is something more specific, more urgent, and far more revealing. This is about the difference between oils that your body recognizes and can process, and oils that your body has never encountered in any meaningful quantity for most of human history, oils that were virtually non-existent in the food supply 100 years ago, and now account for the majority of fat consumed in the Western world. That shift happened quietly. It happened for economic reasons, and it happened inside every fryer, in every chain, in every country, without any of us voting for it. Let us begin with the biology, because before you can understand the deception, you have to understand the mechanism. Your body deals with fat every single day. It processes fat, stores fat, burns fat, and uses fat to build every cell membrane in your body. But not all fats behave the same way. Saturated fats, the kind found in animal products and tropical oils, are chemically stable. They hold their structure under heat. Monounsaturated fats, found in olive oil and avocado oil, are somewhat less stable, but still relatively resistant to damage. And then there are polyunsaturated fats, specifically the omega-6 variety, which are highly unstable. They are biologically reactive. They oxidize easily. And when you expose them to the kind of extreme heat required to fry a piece of chicken, something happens at a molecular level that most people have never been told about. When vegetable oils are heated to the high temperatures required for deep frying, their chemical structure can change, creating trans fats, compounds the body struggles to process efficiently. What makes this worse is that fried foods are often cooked in processed vegetable or seed oils, which may already contain trans fat precursors before heating even begins. And here's the part that the industry does not want magnified. Restaurants reuse cooking oil hundreds of times, creating harmful compounds including acrylamides, toxic aldehydes, hydroxylinolate, and free radicals. A chemical cocktail that builds up with each frying cycle. Every time that oil is heated, it degrades further. Every piece of chicken that comes out of that fryer carries those compounds with it, and you eat them. You eat them at lunch. You eat them on a Tuesday. You eat them at a drive-through window on the way home from work without a second thought, because the smell is extraordinary and the price is affordable, and because nobody told you what was happening inside the fryer. Now let us talk about the specific chains, because not all of them are doing the same thing, and the differences matter enormously. Start with KFC, one of the most recognized food brands on earth. Over 27,000 locations globally, revenues in the billions. KFC primarily uses soybean oil for their frying operations, though the exact oil blend can vary by location and supplier. Like most major fast food chains, KFC made the switch from traditional animal fats to seed oils decades ago for cost and shelf stability reasons. KFC products are fried in oil, which may contain the following: canola oil and hydrogenated soybean oil with TBHQ and citric acid added to protect flavor, plus dimethylpolysiloxane, an anti-foaming agent. Read that again. A silicon-based anti-foaming chemical in your fried chicken oil, not because it makes the chicken taste better, because it stops the oil from bubbling over at industrial frying volumes. TBHQ, tertiary butyl hydroquinone, is a synthetic antioxidant added not for your health, but to preserve the shelf life of the oil itself. The additives are not there for you. They are there for the fryer, but you are the one consuming them. This is not chaos, this is cost optimization, and KFC is far from alone in this approach. McDonald's, the company that once proudly fried its French fries in beef tallow, a fat that generations of customers actually recognized by taste, made one of the most consequential switches in food industry history. McDonald's famously used a blend containing beef tallow for their fries until 1990. Today, in the U.S. towns, McDonald's uses a canola oil blend for frying, a blend consisting of canola, corn, and soybean oils. The switch was made under public pressure, presented as a health improvement. But what replaced the beef tallow was a mixture of highly processed industrial seed oils, oils that, under repeated high-heat frying conditions, generate exactly the kinds of oxidative compounds the medical literature has been documenting with increasing alarm. The irony is almost too sharp to bear. The fat that humans had been rendering and cooking with for thousands of years was removed and replaced with a laboratory-refined product that had existed at industrial scale for less than a century. And here's where it gets worse. Burger King fries in a blend of corn and soybean oil. Wendy's uses a vegetable oil blend. Church's Chicken, despite operating in some jurisdictions under trans fat regulations, uses industrial frying oils across most of its locations. Bojangles, the southern chain with a devoted following, fries in canola and soybean oil blends. Raising Cane's, currently one of the fastest growing chains in America with revenues approaching $5 billion and a fanatical customer base, uses a canola-based frying oil. Jollibee, the Filipino-American crossover brand expanding aggressively across the United States, fries in palm and soybean oil blends. Polo Loco markets itself as a healthier alternative. Flame grilling rather than deep frying most of its chicken, but its fried items still involve vegetable oil blends. What most people are not seeing is the pattern. These are not 9 different companies making 9 different decisions. This is one industry making one decision, driven by one variable: cost. Soybean oil is among the cheapest cooking fats in the world. Canola oil is refined at industrial scale and available in quantities that can supply thousands of restaurant locations simultaneously. The economics are not even close. And so the oil that goes into the fryer at the majority of these chains is not chosen because it is the safest or the most stable under heat or the most beneficial to the customer. It is chosen because it costs the least and lasts the longest before it needs to be changed. Now think about what that means in the context of actual human health. In a 2014 questionnaire-based study of over 111,000 participants, those who ate fried food 4 to 6 times per week had a 39% higher rate of type 2 diabetes, and those who consumed fried foods 7 or more times per week had a 55% increased risk compared to people eating fried foods less than once per week. The research also found that compounds created during frying with seed oils may negatively affect the microbiome and cause or worsen inflammatory disorders of the gut, including inflammatory bowel disease. Scientists found that consuming fried foods was associated with lower diversity of the gut microbiome, and low microbiome diversity is associated with reduced immunity, digestive problems, and other health issues. This is not fringe science. This is published, peer-reviewed research, and it points to something that the fast food industry would very much prefer you not think about while you're standing at the counter deciding between the original recipe and the extra crispy. But here's where the story gets complicated and honest, because this is not a simple good versus evil narrative. The science on seed oils is genuinely contested. Researchers analyzing blood markers from nearly 1,800 people found that higher levels of linoleic acid, an omega-6 fat commonly found in seed oils, were linked to lower inflammation and better cardiometabolic health. According to nutrition scientists at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, the fatty acids typical in seed oils, like linoleic acid, are associated with lower risk of chronic diseases, including cardiovascular disease, heart attack, strokes, and diabetes. A prospective, observational, biomarker-based study analyzing data from over 250,000 individuals in the UK, Biobank, found that higher plasma linoleic acid was associated with a 17% lower risk of total mortality, a 13% lower risk of cardiovascular disease-related death, a 19% lower risk of death from cancer, and an 18% lower risk of death from all other causes. So what is the actual truth? The truth is more specific and more nuanced than either the anti-seed oil movement or the food industry would have you believe. The problem is not seed oils in a bottle on your kitchen shelf, used occasionally at low temperatures to saute vegetables. The problem is seed oils inside an industrial fryer that runs at extreme temperatures all day, every day, with the same oil reused across hundreds of cooking cycles, forming oxidation byproducts and chemical compounds that cold-pressed linoleic acid in controlled clinical trials never produces. The context is everything, and fast food fryers are about as far from that controlled context as you can get. When cooking at home, you are not heating oil all day long or reusing it hundreds of times, so you are not producing acrylamides, aldehydes, free radicals, trans fats, and other toxic byproducts to the same degree as restaurants. That distinction is absolutely critical and almost never discussed in the mainstream conversation about fast food nutrition. The threat is not the oil category. The threat is the oil category plus extreme industrial heat, plus repeated use, plus chemical degradation over time, plus scale. That combination is what you are consuming every time you eat at one of these chains. Now, let us talk about the 3 brands that have made meaningfully different choices. Because they exist, they are operating at scale, and their decisions reveal exactly how achievable a higher standard actually is. The first is Chick-fil-A. Ever since founder Truett Cathy created the Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich, the chain has been cooking its hand-breaded chicken exclusively in fully refined heat-processed peanut oil. The company cites the purity of the oil as enhancing the flavor of the chicken, and notes it contains no trans fat or cholesterol, and contains a balance of monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats. Refined peanut oil has a smoke point of 450 degrees Fahrenheit. That means the oil is far more thermally stable under frying conditions than a highly polyunsaturated soybean or corn oil blend. It does not degrade at the same rate. It does not produce the same oxidative compounds at frying temperatures. And the chain has held this standard since its founding, not because regulators required it, but because a founder made a decision about quality and the company maintained it across decades of growth. As of 2025, Chick-fil-A finished 2024 with an average unit volume of $7, $49 million across its 109 U.S. locations, more than double the average unit volume of most competitors. The highest performing chicken brand in America by revenue per location is also one of the very few using a cleaner, more thermally stable oil. That is not a coincidence. The second is Popeyes. And Popeyes throws a genuine curveball into this entire conversation. Popeyes uses beef tallow in its frying process, a blend that commonly includes beef tallow alongside other oils. The company has confirmed directly on its website that beef tallow is used for frying its products. Animal fats like tallow have a very high smoke point, around 400 to 450 degrees Fahrenheit, and add a rich, savory flavor that distinguishes fried food from chains using neutral vegetable oils. Beef tallow is, in nutritional terms, a traditional fat. It is high in saturated fat, which carries its own considerations, but it is extraordinarily stable under heat, far more resistant to oxidation and chemical degradation than polyunsaturated vegetable oils. Before the industrial seed oil era, beef tallow was the standard frying fat for most of the food industry. McDonald's used it. KFC used it. The flavor that older generations remember as definitively fast food was largely the flavor of beef tallow. It was replaced not because it was dangerous, but because it was expensive and because a particular moment in nutritional science, now substantially revisited, declared saturated fat the primary villain in cardiovascular disease. That moment shaped an entire industry, and Popeyes, to its credit, never fully abandoned the old standard. The third brand in this category operates at a different scale but represents a model worth understanding. A small but growing number of independent and regional chains, particularly those targeting health-conscious consumers, have begun frying in avocado oil, coconut oil, or grass-fed beef tallow, specifically because oils that consist mostly of saturated and monounsaturated fats are the most stable when heated. Coconut, olive, and avocado oils are among the safest and most stable for high heat frying. These choices cost more. Avocado oil is significantly more expensive than soybean oil per gallon. Coconut oil carries a distinct flavor profile that not every fried chicken recipe accommodates, but the decision to absorb that cost, rather than pass the chemical consequences on to the customer, represents an entirely different philosophy of what a food business exists to do. Now, here is the piece of the puzzle that nobody in the mainstream conversation is fully assembling. The United States fast food chicken industry, as of 2025, generates roughly $7 billion in annual revenue and employs about 775,000 people, with industry revenue expanding at an estimated 6% compound annual rate between 2020 and 2025. That is a scale of operation that makes individual consumer choices feel almost irrelevant. When billions of pieces of chicken are being fried every year in the same industrial seed oil blends, and fryers that run continuously in oils that are reused far beyond what any home cook would tolerate, the aggregate health impact of those choices is not a personal wellness issue. It is a public health question. And it is a question that the industry has an enormous financial interest in making sure nobody asks too loudly. What most people are not seeing is that the oil conversation is inseparable from the processed food conversation more broadly. The consumption of the omega-6 polyunsaturated fat linoleic acid has dramatically increased in the Western world, primarily in the form of vegetable oils. Numerous lines of evidence show that linoleic acid in oxidized form promotes oxidative stress, oxidized LDL, and chronic low-grade inflammation, and is likely a major dietary culprit for coronary heart disease, especially when consumed in the form of industrial seed oils. A systematic review of studies measuring changes in linoleic acid concentration in subcutaneous adipose tissue in the USA revealed an approximate 5-fold increase in linoleic acid from 1959 to 2008, rising from 1% to 21, 5% of fat stored in human tissue. Think about what that means. The fat stored in the bodies of Americans has fundamentally changed in composition over the past 60 years. And those 60 years correspond almost exactly with the period during which industrial seed oils replaced animal fats as the dominant cooking medium in the food supply. That is not proof of causation. But it is a question that deserves to be asked with far more urgency than the industry currently permits. And this is where everything changes, because the question is no longer simply about which chain uses which oil. The question is about information. Who has it, who is withholding it, and why. Every major fast food chain publishes nutritional information: calories, fat grams, sodium content, allergen disclosures. But what you will rarely find, and what you will almost never see advertised, is any meaningful disclosure about the type, age, or condition of the frying oil. You will not find a menu board that says chicken fried in 4-day-old soybean oil reused across 40 frying cycles. You will not find a disclosure that says this oil has been heated to 350 degrees continuously since 6 a.m. and will continue to be reused until quality indicators force a change. That information exists. The chains track it internally. But it does not reach the customer because it would make the product significantly less appealing and because no regulation currently requires it. The high temperatures required for deep frying can create advanced glycation end products, harmful compounds that promote oxidative stress and inflammation throughout the body. Chronic inflammation is a root cause of many diseases. Additionally, the high fat content can be difficult to digest, leading to stomach pain, bloating, and indigestion. These are not side effects of eating too much. These are side effects of the specific chemical processes that occur when polyunsaturated oils are heated and reused in the way that fast food fryers operate. The occasional piece of fried chicken is not the crisis. The crisis is the habit. The twice a week, 3 times a week, lunch every other day habit that hundreds of millions of people have built around chains that have quietly optimized their cooking media for cost, not for the customer. Here is the most important thing to understand about the brands that use cleaner fats. They are not doing it because they are morally superior. They are doing it because someone at some point made a different calculation. A calculation that weighted quality over margin, customer health over operational convenience, or legacy standards over cost cutting. In the case of Chick-fil-A, that decision was made by a founder in the 1960s and has simply never been reversed, despite decades of pressure to reduce costs. In the case of Popeyes, it reflects a culinary tradition rooted in Louisiana cooking that happened to prioritize animal fats for flavor, and has maintained that tradition despite the industry-wide move away from tallow. In both cases, the decision was not primarily health-driven. It was quality-driven. The health outcome is a byproduct of a decision made for other reasons. And this is the uncomfortable truth that the industry does not want you to sit with. Better oil is available. It is being used by some chains right now. The choice to use soybean oil is not a technical necessity. It is an economic preference. And that preference is being made by corporations that know, or should know, exactly what happens to polyunsaturated oils at frying temperatures. The information exists. The research exists. The alternative products exist. The decision to not use them is a conscious one made at the executive level in the interest of margin. The escalation from here is simple and serious. Fried foods are typically cooked in oils containing saturated and trans fats, and these 2 types of fat are associated with an increased risk of cardiovascular disease and cancer. Fried foods are typically harder to digest due to their high fat content, causing digestive upset, especially for those with a past medical history of gastrointestinal diseases. The American fast food chicken market alone, not global, just American, represents over $60 billion in annual revenue, with hundreds of millions of individual frying transactions happening every year. The cumulative exposure of the population to degraded, reused high-heat seed oils through this channel is not a small variable in the public health equation. It is a massive one, and it is one that current regulatory frameworks essentially ignore. Think about what that means on a personal level. Every individual sitting in a drive-through line today, every family ordering a 12-piece bucket for dinner tonight, every person who has made fried chicken from a chain their regular lunch option, none of them were told about the oil. None of them were presented with a comparison. None of them had any information on which to base a different decision. The menu told them the calories. The menu told them the protein. The menu told them the allergens. But the menu said nothing about what that protein was cooked in, how long that oil had been in the fryer, how many chemical transformation cycles it had been through, or how the particular oil chosen by this particular chain performs at high heat compared to the alternatives. That is a gap, a deliberate, maintained, commercially convenient gap. And the fact that it exists inside an industry that serves hundreds of millions of meals per week in the United States alone makes it one of the more consequential information asymmetries in modern food culture. The way forward is not panic. It is not the elimination of fried chicken from existence. It is something more radical and more difficult. It is a demand for transparency. The demand that the oil used in a commercial fryer be disclosed with the same clarity as the calorie count. The demand that the reuse policy for frying oil be publicly available the same way the nutritional panel is. The demand that when a chain says their chicken is made with quality ingredients, that claim be verifiable, not just in the spice blend and the chicken sourcing, but in the fat that the entire product is submerged in before it reaches your hands. Some of this is coming. The clean eating movement, the anti-seed oil movement, however imperfectly formed and however contested the science around them, is generating consumer pressure. Seed Oil Scout, an app designed to help consumers identify restaurants using cleaner fats, has accumulated over 2 million downloads. That is not a niche audience. That is a population of people who have specifically sought out this information and made it a factor in their purchasing decisions. The market is beginning to signal something. And historically, when a sufficient portion of consumers begin to care about an ingredient story that a major industry has hidden, the industry eventually responds. But until that response comes, until the disclosures change, until the fryer policies change, until the economics of cleaner oil shift enough to make them viable at the scale of a 27,000 location global chain, you are the only one in a position to ask the question. Not the health department, not the marketing team, not the influencer who was paid to review the new menu item. You, standing at the counter, looking at the menu board, watching the golden brown pieces move through the heat. Because the oil is invisible. The oil is never on the billboard. The oil is never in the commercial. The oil is the one ingredient that shapes everything about what you are actually eating. And it has been kept invisible by design, for decades, by an industry that has calculated correctly for a very long time that as long as it smells good and tastes good and costs less than cooking at home, most people will never ask. The question is whether that calculation continues to hold. Whether the next generation of consumers is as easy to not tell as the last one. Whether the gap between what is actually going into the fryer and what is appearing on the menu board gets wider or narrower. Whether the three chains that chose differently become the exception that proves the rule or the beginning of a new standard. The answer to that question is not sitting in a boardroom. It is sitting with you right now. Because the only thing that changes what goes into a commercial fryer at scale is what comes out of the wallets of the people ordering from it. And you cannot make that decision with information you were never given. The oil is still invisible. The fryer is still running. The question is still unanswered. And somewhere, right now, someone is handing over money for a piece of fried chicken without knowing the first thing about what it was actually cooked in. That should bother you far more than it does.